Bellegarde, 328.
Tonight, re-elected, National Chief Perry Bellegarde will have another term as head of the AFN.
This organization is basically controlled by the Trudeau government.
Warnings and congratulations. We also hear from some of the candidates who lost.
More and more travelers are seeking that authentic, educational tourism experience.
And the Alberta government gives a big boost to help Indigenous tourism in the province. Good evening, I'm Brittany Hobson. Perry Bellegarde will begin his second term as Assembly of First Nations National Chief after winning the AFN election on the second ballot in Vancouver. APTN's Chris Stewart was there and brings us this.
AFN Election Day began early, with candidates attempting to make a final push to gain support. Incumbent Chief Perry Bellegarde visited the BC Chiefs. He talked about walking together.
Chiefs, I'm going to ask for your help again. For another second mandate. In a humble way, like Miles says. Let's keep working together. Thank you.
Voting for the first ballot began at 10 a.m. FSIN Second Vice Chief David Pratt told APTN while preparing to vote that he fully supports Perry Bellegarde.
He's done a lot of work for not just our region but across the country, and I think that work has to continue in terms of finishing the work that he started.
60% of delegate votes were needed to win. By the end of the first ballot, none of the candidates had the required 323 votes necessary. Sheila North had 106 votes, Miles Richardson 87, Russ Diabo received 40, and Catherine Whitecloud received 19 votes. That meant Chief Bellegarde was 37 votes shy. But there was also controversy at the first ballot when it came out that Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett had visited Alberta Chiefs. 4 candidates, excluding Bellegarde, took to the stage in the main assembly hall to complain about Bennett. But AFN Regional Chief Marlene Portra issued a statement which stated the minister did not reference the election or any candidate. The second ballot results were read to the delegates at around 4:30 Pacific time.
Perry Bellegarde, 328.
This time, Bellegarde took home 328 votes, more than enough to win a second term. Most of the losing candidates gave concession speeches. Russ Diabo, however, issued a warning.
You have voted, and as I told you, there'll be consequences for the way that you voted.
Diabo also criticized Minister Bennett's breakfast meeting with the Alberta Chiefs.
I think this whole election is really tainted with the Crown Minister being involved in the election process, meeting with Chiefs caucuses even before the voting process began. You can object to that all you want, but it reinforces what I've been saying about how this organization is basically controlled by the Trudeau government.
Bellegarde was also once again sworn in as National Chief of the AFN. He told those gathered that there is still work to be done and that they need to have a united voice.
This gap will be closed. Better housing, better education, better health care, and yes, lands and resources coming back to First Nations people, because we know it's assumed Crown sovereignty. We know it's assumed Crown jurisdiction, and we're going to get that back in our rightful place in this land. That's what I see. That's my vision, that's my hope, and we need to work together to do that.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The recently re-elected National Chief sat down for a lengthy interview with Nation to Nation's Todd Lamoran today. Among the issues discussed was why the AFN wasn't talking about the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Perry Bellegarde also discussed the controversy over Indigenous Crown Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett showing up to the conference on Election Day.
The Alberta Chiefs invited her, so that's their right, that's their purview, it's their caucus. So the Chiefs wanted her in, so she went in. I think she issued a statement again. They had issues they wanted to talk to her about. That's what they focused on. And even the Alberta Regional Chief issued a statement, you know, that they invited her in. And so that's where that rests. Again, you respect the Chief's direction. It's their caucus rooms. And clearly it didn't have any implication or any impact on the election in any way, shape, or form, because there's issues to always talk about with the Crown.
Do you think, though, that her appearance was inappropriate, that just the timing of it shouldn't have happened on the day of the election?
Yeah, again, there's that perception. Where I just focused on meeting the Chiefs. there's an election going on, and who votes for the national chief is the chiefs. So I just kept focusing on meeting the chiefs, talking to them, listening to their issues, concerns. How can we make our AFN better, and how can we be more responsive to their issues and concerns that they identify? So that's what I focused on.
The AFN Youth Council put forward a resolution to oppose the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and there is no resolution on that. Why is that, and where do you stand on this pipeline issue?
Oh, we stand with the rights and title holders. And I've always supported the right to self-determination. That's the most fundamental right we have as Indigenous peoples. I've always said we have the 5 elements for the right to be recognized: our own languages, our own lands, our own laws, our own people, and our own identifiable forms of government. So that right to self-determination means to recognize the right to say yes and or the right to say no. The whole pipeline dialogue and discussion is very divisive. Premiers are fighting each other. Canadians disagree. There's all sides, even with chiefs. So you got to go to the rights and title holders, and that's where that decision rests. It doesn't rest with any council, the Youth Council, Women's Council. It doesn't rest with that. Go to the rights and title holders, and that's where the decision should be made.
You can watch the entire interview with Perry Bellegarde right after the news on a special edition of Nation to Nation with Todd Lamarand. It's the final day at the Assembly of First Nations gathering in Vancouver, and Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Carolyn Bennett addressed the crowd. APTN's Tina House has the story.
Just one day after the National Chief election that saw National Chief Perry Bellegarde get re-elected, controversy still swirled around the fact that Minister Bennett had a meeting with Alberta chiefs on voting day. She addressed those concerns at a press conference just before her speech at the Assembly.
It's a matter of a new regional chief asking for a meeting. I think that we had suggested it be off-site. It was more convenient for her caucus to meet in the caucus room. That was their preference, and it was a good meeting, and actually had nothing to do with the election.
We also asked Gary McLean, a proxy member from Manitoba, if he thought she interfered in the election process.
I believe our leadership know who they're going to vote for. It doesn't matter who is going to come in and try. I do not believe that she would have that kind of influence.
And in her speech, Minister Bennett said the status quo is no longer acceptable for Indigenous people.
And so we are asking for your help in crafting a legal framework that is really about the implementation of inherent and treaty rights, and it's about holding Canada to account.
After her speech, chiefs eagerly lined up at the mic.
But I asked this government, and I asked Justin, your Prime Minister, Minister Bennett, to talk about and deal with the adequate resources for the young people with disabilities.
77-year-old Lois Rulin has been coming to these events for many years, and she has her own opinion about government promises.
There's a lot of hot air, and they don't follow up on their intentions. And I wish I was younger so I could be in Ottawa and give them what for.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The families of Colton Bushy and John Stiers addressed the AFN. More on that after the break.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamarand, and here's what's coming up on a special AFN election edition of Nation to Nation. Perry Bellegarde was re-elected National Chief, but not without accusations of it being tainted, as Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett visited the Alberta caucus on Election Day. We'll have a full interview with Bellegarde. As well, Ontario has a new regional chief. We'll talk to her about what a Doug Ford-led government means to Indigenous people there. That's coming up right after the national news.
Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Cloudy and 24 for St. John's, 29 in Fredericton, 18 in Happy Valley Goose Bay, 19 and sunny in Inukjuak. A rainy day in parts of Quebec, 27 with a chance of thunderstorms in Montreal, 21 in Val-d'Or. Cloudy skies for southern Ontario, a high of 25 in Sarnia and Windsor, 17 in Timmins. Overcast and 25 in Sioux Lookout. A warm day in northern Manitoba, 28 above in Churchill and Thompson. A mix of sun and clouds and 27 in Gimli and Winnipeg. In Saskatchewan, 23 in Estevan, Yorkton, Regina, and Swift Current. Cloudy and 23 in Meadow Lake on Friday, 28 in Stony Rapids. The families of John Stiers and Colton Bushy have very similar stories of young lives ended too soon by violence. This morning they appeared at the AFN convention and condemned the justice system for failing them. Here again is Chris Stewart, and he brings us this.
John Stiers was killed in 2016. He was shot with a shotgun twice by Peter Cahill on Cahill's driveway in the middle of the night. He was found not guilty of second-degree murder. Today, Stiers' family and the family of Colton Bushy addressed the AFN Assembly. Stiers' widow, Lindsay Hill, said the Canadian justice system is broken.
My 4-year-old daughter knew the right thing to do, not to leave your house armed with a loaded shotgun and shoot someone twice and kill them. And this is what happened to John. And again, the Canadian system found a killer not guilty.
She addressed those gathered that the justice system needs to be completely rebuilt.
The Canadian justice system is a system that allows a person to act as judge, jury, and executioner. The system lacks any accountability for taking a precious, sacred life. All the areas of the system need to be thoroughly examined, from policing to the courts. All the areas need change, not just juries.
Deborah Stiers, John's mother, says her son did not deserve to die.
I love John so much. And I want justice done for this and anyone else. Okay?
Colton Bushy's family also criticized the justice system. Debbie Baptiste addressed the crowd.
Let's not let this happen to no more families. I don't want people burying their loved ones, parents burying their kids. That's not right.
Baptiste pleaded with the gathered chiefs for help stopping the deaths of more people.
Help us. And where's my chief, Clint Watney? I haven't seen that guy in 2 years. I'm sorry for getting emotional, but this is coming from my heart. Thank you.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The concession speeches for the 4 candidates not elected national chief were mostly conciliatory. There were thanks and pledges to work together, although one candidate was booed as he warned chiefs of the consequences of voting to re-elect Perry Bellegarde. Here's a little bit from the candidates.
Thank you for listening to my message yesterday. I gave you my heart, and you made a decision, and I respect that.
This organization is basically controlled by the Trudeau government. And I'm saying to the people who are watching, it's really up to you now, because it's clear that this organization is not going to reform itself. It's going to have to happen from the outside. And I'm not going anywhere, so I'm going to be working to help reform the organization, and also still stopping the Trudeau legislation in a different role, but I still intend to fight to do that.
At the outset of this campaign, Perry and I sat down in a room, just the two of us, and there was some discussion and, some implications of making a deal, and I wanted none of it. I would not make a deal coming into this campaign. But I did say to Perry, there's one deal I want, Perry. When this campaign is over, I want to sit down with you just like we are now. I want to look you in the eye and commit to working together for the betterment of all our people.
My message across the country and what I heard was that we have to stay unified. We have to love each other. We have to help each other. We can't let government tell us what to do. One of the things my dad told me was never let the government treat you like children. And he told me that before he passed away. And I tell you that Don't let the government treat you like children.
Today, the Assembly of First Nations took time to honor the late Chief Mike Smith at this year's Assembly. Smith was a highly respected leader who continues to have a positive impact on many people. Our Amber Bernard reports.
Former Yukon Regional Chief Mike Smith, also known as Shakuni, passed last year. The AFN wanted to take the opportunity at this year's Assembly to properly honor his incredible life's work and memory. Smith was key to leading land claims in the Yukon, often referred to as a sharp mind and advocate for Indigenous rights.
He never worked 1 minute but for fighting for his people. From the day that he went to school, university, and until the day he passed, he was always involved in the fighting for the rights and our rightful place within this Canadian fabric.
Among his many accomplishments, Smith was also known for being skilled on the ice.
I think my fondest time was watching him play hockey. He was always an excellent left winger, and he liked the game. He enjoyed it. He was quick.
It is clear Shakuni still has a positive impact on the lives of many and is dearly missed. Amber Bernard, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Racism is no stranger to the city of Thunder Bay. Last summer, the city launched an incident reporting service for people who experience or witness racism, and recently it released the preliminary findings. Willow Fiddler digs into the numbers and brings us this.
When Thunder Bay's local daily newspaper published an op-ed with the headline, "System that rewards status Indians spectacularly unfair," 29 people reported the Chronicle-Journal for racism. That was last August, shortly after the city had launched a racism incident reporting service.
The report really confirmed the reality of racism in Thunder Bay, particularly as it relates to Indigenous people.
In the first year of the pilot project, almost 200 people reported incidents of racism using the service available online, by telephone, and in person. The data was collected by the Lakehead Social Planning Council and the results analyzed by researcher Amy Siciliano. Almost half of all 176 racist incidents reported were verbal assaults, and 60% targeted Indigenous people.
And what we saw with Indigenous people that were targeted was that it happened everywhere. On the streets, in restaurants, in health buildings, on the bus.
The controversial op-ed published by the Chronicle-Journal wasn't the only time the paper was reported for racism. Betty Karpik is a local Indigenous artist who was interviewed by the daily paper last summer.
The reporter started telling me about incidents about Indigenous people in Thunder Bay and making shocking comments about them. It was so shocking to me, and I wasn't sure what route to take. I was aware of the hotline, and that's why I called it.
Karpik said she expected something would be done to address it, but nothing was done. Amina Abu-Bakari is the chair of the city's anti-racism committee. She said the report confirms what they've been hearing for a long time.
But then we needed to know where were these things happening and who were they happening to and how they could be addressed.
City Council has extended the reporting service for another year. Abu-Bakari said they are working to ensure people feel safe reporting incidents.
And maybe people will be more comfortable then to come forward and say, this thing has happened to me, and get the support that is required, and let them know that, you're not alone, we are there for you and we'll be there for you.
APTN reached out to the Chronicle-Journal for comment but didn't get a response. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Time for another quick break. Coming up, more and more people are traveling to Alberta to experience Indigenous culture. Here's a look at the rest of Friday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. A warm day for Fort McMurray and Grand Prairie with a high of 28. Cloudy skies in southern Alberta, 24 in Red Deer, 23 in Calgary. A heat warning in effect for parts of BC, 35 in Kamloops, 34 in Penticton and Bella Coola, 21 in Prince Rupert, 26 in Fort St. John. In the Yukon, sun and a high of 29 in Watson Lake, 15 in Rock River, Another hot day for parts of the NWT, 33 in Fort Liard, Trout Lake, and Fort Simpson. Cooler temps for Nunavik with a high of 10 degrees, 0 in Sax Harbor. In Nunavut, 21 and rain in Arviat and Whale Cove. Just 8 degrees for Joe Haven. A bit of sun and a high of 9 in Iqaluit on Friday. The Alberta government is helping to fund Indigenous tourism. It says more and more people traveling in the province want a more authentic tourism experience, and they may be right. Tamara Pimentel met with one family who traveled overseas to take part in Blackfoot culture.
River Ranch Tourism Lodge on Siksika First Nation has some visitors. Rebecca Shinka and her family traveled all the way from Germany to embrace Indigenous culture.
It's a great chance being here to really experience something firsthand and how it is, rather than something like a Hollywood facade.
As they arrived, the family was greeted by an elder who toured them around while sharing Blackfoot stories and songs.
After that, we went to the sun dance, and I think that was the best part of today, to see all the teepees with the beautiful and amazing designs and really feeling and seeing what was going on there.
Indigenous tourism is growing in Alberta.
More and more travelers are seeking that authentic, educational tourism experience.
Last week, the province gave a $315,000 grant to create Indigenous Tourism Alberta. Something Dion Redgun, founder of River Ranch, can benefit from.
New organization, Indigenous Tourism Alberta, now can support other individuals such as myself.
River Ranch is Redgun's vision, a way of sharing and preserving his Blackfoot culture. He says the money also provides work for the people of Siksika, such as preparing meals or giving tours.
And it's hospitality and tourism is an industry that's growing in Indigenous communities right now.
After touring, the family comes back to the lodge for a home-cooked meal of venison and bison. Then down the road, settle in for a night in traditional accommodations.
I mean, sleeping in a teepee, I guess you can't beat that, telling at school at home, you know, we slept in a real teepee. So I'm sure they'll like it. I mean, this experience is something I would recommend to everybody, you know, traveling Alberta and having the opportunity just to use it and have a look for themselves.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Siksika First Nation.
That's your APTN National News for this Thursday. For more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. Stick around for a special edition of Nation to Nation with Tom Lamrad. He sits down with National Chief Perry Bellegarde. I'm Brittany Hobson. Have a great night.
Ista Katia Nawako Magnak.